sexy on secular sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show barely passing for presentable. I'm Christy Powell. My co-host tonight is a little of this and just a lot of that. Welcome, Nate Smith.
Hey, Christy.
And our guest tonight is an agent with Recovering from Religion and fellow sex advocate. Welcome, Helen Greene.
Hello!
Tonight, it is batter up for both teams. So give Coach Christy and the gang a call at 512-991-9242 or on the internets at tiny.cc/callsex. The show is starting right now, so play ball.
All right. Well, we're not really in the habit of asking our guests to just lay out all of their adjectives, but for the purposes of this conversation, I think it would be useful to acknowledge our own identities here. I'll start by saying that even though I see myself as being poly and somewhat pan or at least hetero-flexible, I'm currently in a monogamous relationship with a woman with no intentions of changing that, even to scratch my occasional itch for fellatio. So, Helen and Nate, how does your identity match your world?
So, there we go. So, I'm bisexual with some pan tendencies. But just like you, Christy, I'm in a heteronormative relationship that's pretty monogamous for the most part. And but it's one of those things that the body wants what the body wants, even though you're in that relationship. So that's how I roll.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Nate, how about you, boss?
I waffle between the labels of bi and gay, but it's usually just dependent on the company I'm with. So if I'm with if I'm with a bunch of hetero people, or if I'm at work, I work in construction and trades, I'll usually just say gay so that I don't have to explain the various ins and outs of human sexuality to them. But I am bi. I've been with men and women. I'm just married to a man now, so gay's easier.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
Yeah.
What are some of the assumptions that people make about you because of the, big eye roll and air quotes for the podcast audience, for the lifestyle that you lead?
Well, I know for myself that it's one of those things that I get to kind of move in that straight space a lot of the time because all my friends know I'm bi, and they're really accepting and loving, wonderful people. A couple of my family members know, but for the most part, they don't. And as far as, my workspace, social life and stuff, it doesn't really come up because, as soon as you say, my husband or, my boyfriend, or, if you're on the, if you're male and you say girlfriend or wife or something like that, the questions just stop. They're just like, okay. So,
Right.
you kind of can move in those spaces a little bit easier because, straight is usually, it shouldn't be, but it's usually the default, Yeah,
no, I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot of drop jaws when people find out that I'm with a man, just because I don't really present, as what straight people might think of as a gay man. And I have hobbies that don't really align with what people think of when they think of gay culture. I go to the range. I'm an outdoors person, I work in construction, stuff like that. So when people find out, I don't make it a point to announce it to everyone, but when people find it, really? You are? And I'm like, yeah, we're, we don't all wear short shorts, and it's not all this stereotypical mumbo jumbo. I'm not a Britney Spears fan, but I am a Lady Gaga fan.
Okay, fair. Well, I mean, that's just human.
We can accept
that's just
you.
human.
Thank you.
You get your gay cred. You get your gay cred now.
Yeah, no, Nate, I feel like I'm almost in an opposite situation. Doing this show, just dressing the way that I do, and these other things. I think people assume that I am living a much more queer life than the one I actually am. Like when they meet my partner, back when the Free Thought Library was open, and I would come in and introduce her, I think a lot of people were a little bit surprised, and it can be honestly even a little bit awkward because of the work that I do when I work with the queer community and I am a member of the queer community and I'm an advocate for the queer community. And then people come into my therapy office or my digital therapy office, and I'll tell a personal story and start throwing around like her and she, and people get a little bit caught off guard by that. It can be really awkward wanting to be like authentic and let people know your adjectives, let people know who you are, and let people know about your life without having to like just correct every little thing that people assume.
That is exactly the opposite of what I usually get, because if I'll be, talking at work with somebody I barely know, and I'll be like, oh, is that your girlfriend, or what are you having for dinner? I'll be like, yeah, he's making dinner tonight. And they're like, wait, he? I'm like, yeah, he. Like, you're gay? And like, yes, I am. And again, that gets back to what I was saying earlier, is I don't really go out of my way to correct people, because I'm there to work. I'm not there to be their sex counselor.
Sure.
So
Right.
I just usually like, yeah, sure, whatever. You call it what you want.
Well, what are some of the other ways that you don't like fit in to the role that people ascribe to you, or that they assume is your identity?
This is something that like I've been, especially over the past, I want to say a few years, that I've given a lot of thought about, is especially since there's so much more exposure to gay culture and queer culture and stuff like that, like, when you're kind of operate, like I call it like performing straight,
Mm-hmm.
People will just go, oh, that's a straight person, but that's not my identity. That's not who I am. And that can be a little bit frustrating, because a part of me really wants to be like, I am bisexual, I'm cis, and I present very cis, but that's not who I am. And it doesn't really give a full picture of the type of person that you are. So, it can get a little bit frustrating when you want to be a little bit more open, like you were saying, Christy, like you feel that, how you present and how people perceive you, isn't completely who you are as a person, and then on the other side, if when I'm in like queer spaces and stuff like that, and, I'm talking about, my sexuality and things that, that are a part of my life, it's a little easier, than with the straights, because they're like, oh, okay, well, you're bi, and that's awesome. And you can be a little bit more open. You can be a little bit more explicit and talking about your desires and types of relationships you've had and stuff like that. So it's that very weird dichotomy, you're going kind of back and forth with it, and it's a kind of a weird sort of place to be sometimes, when you have this, bi or pansexual drive, and trying to figure out your space there, and how you want to present and what information you want to share with people.
Yeah, that's a really awkward piece of all of this. Just the simple fact that, for better or for worse, the queer community tends to be a lot more sex positive, a lot more sex literate. And so when you're in queer spaces, there's, also pushback, and there's a potential for exclusion in those different ways, but if you're too straight presenting. But
Yeah.
overall, it's easier in so many ways to choose to pass, and we'll get into that whole concept and some of the real flaws in the notion of passing, but I guess I'm curious how both of you code in these different places. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the contrast between Nate and I and those kinds of things, but what do your friends know about you? What do your acquaintances, or what do strangers assume about you?
All my family and friends know. It's a little bit. It would be a little bit difficult to keep it from them. And as as I get older and older, I care less and less what other people think. I'm just kind of myself, you know. So it's kind of like Helen was saying, right? Like my sexuality and who I sleep with is not my entire personality, right? Like it's such a small part, right, of what I do. Like I don't go around being, you know, I'm construction worker Nate or I'm video gamer Nate, right? Like you don't walk into a room and be like, hey everybody, I play video games. Yep,
Right.
I play video games. That's what I do, right? It's just a part of what makes you who you are. So it's making it more normal is important for sure.
Sure. Well, I suppose I'll go ahead and throw in here as I believe the only non-cis person at the table that gender is different from orientation in these kinds of spaces, because when it comes to orientation, people do tend to make assumptions, whereas your gender is very much expressed and in certain ways on display, but can also be like really misread in those ways. Like I don't choose to use they, them pronouns, and perhaps I should, you know, I think of myself as like cis-ish, and he, him suits me. And I like being a he, him. It lines up with my identity, but it also comes attached with a bunch of assumptions, not just about, you know, toxic masculinity or what a he has to be, but a lot of assumptions with my partner, with myself, with people close to me, sort of forgetting about some of those like more genderqueer aspects of my identity. And then you throw in, you know, girly hair and a girly name and painted fingernails, and people get really thrown for a loop. So it can be kind of agonizing, honestly, just navigating like basic coffee pickup type interactions and that kind of stuff. Do y'all see that on your end of things? You know, when you call to make a dinner reservation and people assume that you are with a different type of partner or that kind of thing?
I know that I don't very much, just because, again, like it's just, I think it's a little, because I present very feminine and I present very cis, that people just automatically go into like, okay, that's a straight person. And I am in a relationship with a cis male. So people just are like, okay, you know, that's the way it is and stuff. So, you know, I don't deal so much with the trying to people with making those assumptions. If I was with in the past when I was younger and I was in relationships with women, you know, that natural tendency, the natural tendency was that you are still cis, you know, you are still straight, you know, and it's just like, well, no, I'm, you know, I've had a girlfriend before and stuff like that. And that can get a little bit frustrating because you have to correct people, you know, and that can get a little bit annoying, you know, and because you're just like, please stop thinking of, you know, certain people just one way just by their presentation. You know, I can imagine that can get really, really frustrating, you know, for certain people to have to constantly correct.
Sure. Yeah, no, I kind of appreciate the fact that the three of us are doing this show, because we do cover so much ground in terms of types of relationships and orientations, and also the assumptions that people make about folks like us, whatever the hell that even actually means.
Right. And I also like, and I have to imagine, like, you know, like I have a child that is queer and bi, you know, a non-binary child that is also bisexual. And that has to be, you know, it's like, is that even allowed? You know, can you do that? You know, because they're, you know, because it's all about, but because, and also that's the sort of thing, like, when you're talking about gender and how you present and stuff, people will tend to think like trans and non-binary people must be, you know, queer in a certain way as their sexuality, you know, you know, that they're, you know, that they must be poly or pan or whatever, you know, and that's not always the case, but because of these ideas that people have brought on, and these perceptions that they have, they automatically start making certain assumptions about people, like, if you're like a cis man, but you dress a little bit more feminine, like like you were saying, Christy, or like Nate presents more masculine, people will make certain assumptions about you that you're kind of like, no, please don't do that. But because just the way that our society and those social cues have been taught to us.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sincere in asking the question, but I do wonder, or I hesitate maybe thinking that we should have a more like fixed system of signaling people, right? Like I'm not necessarily advocating for bringing back like the one earring on the gay ear or anything quite like that. But
is that ever really a thing though?
I mean, no.
It was in the 90s. I remember that.
For a small group of people in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I got my ear pierced, I had to be very mindful to double and triple check that I got it on the straight ear, only to, lo and behold, maybe not. But yeah, none of these things are set in stone. So maybe that's a reason to not broadcast them in these ways. I mean, I don't know. What do y'all think? Is it vital? Is it useful even to maybe signal in these ways, or should people be more sophisticated than that?
I think it's more important to break down these perceptions that people who are outside of the community tend to have. And like people like you and people like me are helping people outside the community to realize that it's not just a binary thing. Like you were saying, I have a female name and hair polish and long hair and whatnot, but it helps to educate people that, the way people feel about their gender isn't just one or the other, right? Like it's a spectrum and it's a dial. So providing examples of people who buck the trend, I think is really, really important in helping to normalize queer culture.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but then I have to wonder about folks like Helen and to a certain extent myself that are operating or living a lifestyle that is within like the default that then are kind of overlooked in these ways and perhaps uninvited to queer spaces. Is that fair to say, Helen? Has that been your experience at all?
Not so much now, but definitely when I was younger,
Sure.
especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, when the queer community was really trying to gain rights and come out of the closet and to be accepted and stuff like that. Being bisexual, it was kind of weird. I was treated kind of coldly in the queer community, because I've had lesbians be like, I have no interest in dating a bi person, just because of that
sort
fear.
of that gold star philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. Or the idea that like, oh, eventually I would want to be with a man, or,
right.
like I couldn't be in a committed relationship and that kind of thing. These old assumptions about people that are bi and pan and that, and how we navigate our relationships and things like that. I remember that happening. I feel that like, if I was going to enter a queer relationship now, I think that it would be a lot easier because people now have a better understanding of sexuality, how it expresses itself. Some people are geared toward monogamy, some people are poly, some people are poly light, all these different things. So, it's now that there's so much more education out there and people saying that, sexuality and gender comes in so many different shades that, it would probably be easier for me than when it was when I was younger, and that's been a really positive thing too. And also too, like, let's, we can tell the normies that like, hey, that, hey, that interest that you have in someone of the same sex as you, you don't have to hide that anymore. You can talk about your fantasies. You can talk about the things that you desire and not feel ashamed of it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, y'all are both bi and a little bit older than me. Would you say that notion of bi just being like one stop on the gay train or whatever, is that going away? Is that better now than it was?
In my opinion, it is still a big problem in the gay community. Like there's a lot of guys who won't date bi guys. It's gay or GTFO. And I experienced that back when I was in my 20s. I still know younger folks and people in the community that get that now. So I hope that it's getting better. I've been out of the game for quite some time, but from what I hear from folks who are still, on the dating scene, it is still a problem.
Sure. Well, I know we have at least one caller that's been waiting for us the whole time we've been having this conversation. So I'm going to let Nate get that pulled up. But I'd really love to hear from both of you just how you respond to people who believe that passing is a privilege. I should acknowledge we've been talking, the three of us, this whole time without necessarily acknowledging that it can be easier to pass, like as a cis presenting man who is dating a cis presenting woman. There are certainly situations where I wouldn't experience the same discrimination as if I was with a man or something like that. But I don't know. What is y'all's experience? How do you feel about that notion of passing as privilege?
For me, I definitely feel a little bit, because yes, it can make things a little bit easier, but there's also this feeling almost like imposter syndrome, I am not straight, and the fact that I have this identity that I want to express, but because people make assumptions and stuff like that, and unless I feel like sharing, I can kind of not just pretend yep, I'm completely straight, hetero relationship. Yep, fine. I passed the straight test. Yay for me. But it can get really, but it makes you uncomfortable. There's a part of me that there's a part of me that I'm not showing, and I can understand, especially in the bi community, of people that default to a straight relationship because of pressure. They might feel that, especially if you have family and friends that don't understand what bisexuality isn't, their prejudice or whatever. They make assumptions that you will fall into those spaces just because it's easier to navigate. But there's a part of you that's always am I being really true to myself? Is this who I really am? And it's sometimes it can be a little bit disheartening in that way.
Sure. And we'll talk more about this, but I guess I want to highlight for the audience, just myself as a therapist and myself as somebody in that situation, that when you pass well enough for long enough, you can mask so well that you start to forget your own identity. And, Helen, you were talking about this sort of nagging feeling that you don't necessarily fit in, or that this isn't necessarily you. And I hear that and I feel that, but I also know that it can be really easy to kind of forget about those pieces of yourself. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, well, why did I do that? Oh, right. Because I'm queer. Right. Yeah.
Right.
There was that whole thing in high school. Yeah. I remember that was a thing. And it can kind of mask your identity from yourself even. But Nate, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, that really hits home for me as somebody who didn't come out until my 20s, because it was just easier to pass, and it was just easier not to confront the difficulties that gay people go through, and people on the spectrum go through. And I think that it kind of is a bit of a privilege to be able to pass and not have to confront that. I've never had to go through something like what a trans person must go through, right? When they're trying to pass as their preferred gender. That is so, I have so much respect for what they must go through, that in these last few years, I've kind of felt like I need to wear that more, and I need to be more of an ambassador for the queer community. So what I did a few years ago is I started wearing a hot pink hard hat to work, just so that everybody would know.
You've been bragging about it. I'm glad we finally get to see it.
Oh yeah, no, it's real, bro. I wear that all the time, and it comes up in conversation, and it kind of, I get a few looks, I get a few dirty looks, but I get a lot of chuckles. And I actually, for working in an industry that is male dominated and is characterized by people that you might think might not really be allies to the LGBTQ community, I get so much more like pats on the back and friendliness and, hey, that's cool, man, and blah, 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 than you might think. I think it really is. I think we really are moving forward as a society. That gives me hope.
Hey, that's great to hear. Who did you want to talk to first tonight?
Well, we have long-suffering Turquoise on the line, and she wants to talk about, she's kind of figuring out what label to use for herself, what she more identifies with, whether it be bisexual or pansexual. So Turquoise, you are on with Christy, Helen, and Nate. What's up?
Hi, nice to be on the show again. Nice to see you all. It's actually nice to see at least two bi people on the show. I'm sorry, Christy. I don't know exactly what they identify as. It's just three queer people who I can actually maybe who I think might have some authority on this question. So the thing is, I've always identified as bi, but recently a friend of mine who used to identify as bi realized they were pan instead, and they told me the reason for the change was because they learned that bisexuality is exclusive to trans and non-binary identities, and they're attracted to trans and NB people. The problem is that I have also been attracted to trans and non-binary people before as well, but the thing is, I've heard before that people have been recently been using the term bisexuality to be more inclusive of other genders. That more people have been using a definition that says bisexuality is the attraction to more than one gender, as opposed to quote unquote the two genders. Mm-hmm. I went searching online to see what most people agreed that the definition was, but all I found was discourse. Everyone is arguing over whether or not the term is exclusive to trans people, especially those outside the binary. It also really doesn't help if you go to the Wikipedia page for bisexuality, because if you go there, the very second sentence says, it may also be defined as romantic or sexual attraction to people of any sex or gender identity, which is also known as pansexuality, which doesn't seem to be right. So my question is whether bisexuality is now considered to be exclusive of trans and NB people, as the Greek prefix of the word would imply, and if so, would pansexuality be the best alternative?
Etymology questions.
Yeah.
What do y'all got for this?
Prefixes are a bit of a pain. There is a lot of overlap between those two terms, and I think that what you're saying is more or less correct, and that bisexual is more the male and the female, and pansexual is more inclusive as to more than one gender. But the other thing that we have to remember too is that these terms are always in a state of evolution. They're not static terms, right? Like language changes all the time, and as this becomes more normalized, people are going to play with this, and people are doing that now, right? Like they're kind of playing with the definitions of it. So it's not like there really is a hard definition. I think a lot of it is that we have to choose for ourselves what sits with us and what makes me feel good and what do I feel comfortable with telling people and what feels right. How about you, Helen?
I know for myself, like I've been identifying as bisexual since I was like 15 years old. So, that's always the term because that's what it was when I was younger, that if you were attracted to both genders, you were bi. So I've always identified with that. And, now that, gender presentation and trans are, becoming more visible and part of, the normal experience we have, I would say, like, I'm bi with a curiosity with trans people, with pansexuality, but I haven't really jumped into that pool yet because my experiences have been with cis men and women. So, that is kind of the water that I swim in. but I always say all words are made up anyway, and we're going to come up with new terms and new ways that we're going to express how we express our sexuality and our genders. So, for me, I can kind of say that, use whatever term you feel comfortable with, if you want to use, pansexual, use pansexual. If you want to use bisexual, use bisexual. You don't have to completely settle on one word to embrace your identity, because also too, I found that, as these things start becoming more visible and the more education comes out of it, it's such a movable piece of who you are, that those some terms are you're going to identify with, and then other ones you're going to discard. So I wouldn't worry so much about the label. I would just as you do more education and stuff like that, if there's a certain term that you feel comfortable with and identifies you, use that. I mean, you could use purple, I'm purple, and that's my sexuality. And, it's because that's, you have to find something that makes you feel comfortable, and not worry about, how other people are going to perceive you. I just say bi because that's the default I've always been. And that's the one I keep using. So.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Helen. All words are made up and the points don't matter. Ultimately, whatever feels right for you is great. And we can have this very nuanced discussion and kind of have on this show before. And I've always kind of been on the other side of it. So forgive me for presenting this position. But a lot of people will say bi just means two, or more than two. So if you are interested in two genders or more than two genders, then it fits. And it gets tricky when we start talking about, is this, am I only attracted to cis men and cis women? Because I don't feel like that is a accurate understanding of what trans folks are or how they fit into these kinds of conversations. And so on the one hand, I'd like to lean into pan if you have any interest, really outside of the more than one gender. I would say pan is a really great word for that. But also, people don't always understand what that means. And really, any word that communicates the idea that you're trying to express to the people you're trying to express it to is the right word. When you are talking to your grandmother, you might use a different term than when you are at a happy hour full of younger folks or whatever it is. I don't mean to imply that older folks never understand these things, but I would say that whatever gets you through life easiest, right? I don't know that you need to agonize over what label fits you best so much as how best to communicate who you are to the people you're talking to. Okay.
That's precisely why I've been agonizing over it, because I want to be able to describe myself in a way that makes me feel comfortable, but I also don't want to confuse anybody who, whatever the context may be, who I tell if I say, oh, I'm bi or I'm pan. Lately, I've really been agonizing because if they, especially if I consider being pan, the thing is, I know I have a preference for women. So if pansexuality is by definition this kind of a disregard of gender in terms of attraction, does having a preference for women, does that contradict that?
I don't think so.
No, not at all. I'll just say very briefly that you're in very good company. I'll have to look it up and put it in the show notes of this episode, but there was a great book by one of the folks who helped write the algorithm for Match.com, who found pretty overwhelmingly people who identify as bisexual generally have a preference. It's very rare to meet somebody who is truly a 50-50 both team player. Even if you go both ways, you tend to be better at offense or at defense, and that's fine. That's part of the game.
I love it. Well played. Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to try to look for one word that explains who you are sexually, I don't know that word really exists, right? I don't think it's bi or pan. If you're gonna try to convey the nuances of who you're attracted to, it's going to take more than one word. So, you know, you don't have to be a slave to prefixes. You know, like there is gender is a dial, it's a spectrum. So like Christy was saying, right, you might be, you know, 7 towards men. Like me, myself, I'm much more attracted to men than I am to women, but I do still like boobies. So, you know, I'm definitely on that spectrum, right? Right. See, Christy, yeah. So it's like, it's not like you're ever going to find one word that quantifies where you stand on that spectrum. I mean, it's always going to have to be a conversation. And I mean, that's not something that you should dread. You know, it's something that should be looked forward to. And you sound like you're doing pretty well with it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. It's funny. I just like lately. I just having this. There's this visual I'm just having in my head where I feel like the best way to describe my orientation right now is if you imagine a chair in the middle of the room, and there are these 4 pride flags surrounding it. There's the bi flag, the pan flag, the SecX flag, and the demi flag, the demisexual flag, and they're all physically fighting over this chair. And I just say, there, that's it. I feel like it's just like I feel like that's the most accurate way I can describe myself sometimes. And I'm like, wow, this is a mess. Stop fighting that.
Well,
You know, you can have more than one flagpole. Do with that inner joke inside your head whatever you want to do.
So your freak flag fly. Your many freak flags. It's fine because like there is like sexuality and gender expression, all these different things. They are not binary things. They're not like one or the other. You know, they move, they shift. They're flags flying in the wind, shifting around, doing different things. You know, and you just gotta go with the some days I feel very straight. On other days, I feel very gay. And other days, I feel nothing. So it's all about, you know, how you're feeling and what feels good for you to identify. And like, as Chrissy said, depends on who you're talking to, your social circle, all these different things. So don't get hung up on terms because, you know, like even for me, all the new terms has been a huge learning curve for me. And I'm still like, I know what I am, and I'm just going to keep using the term that I'm always using because using a new term is just going to drive me nuts. So,
yeah, just try to remember too. You know, language serves us, not the other way around.
Yeah, well said.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I've been enjoying the discussion as well about passing. Whenever passing, if especially Helen, from what you were saying, since I was in a heterosexual relationship for a while, and I was in a lot of circles where, in hindsight, I realized that I'm not sure how well I would have done in those circles if people realized I wasn't straight. So,
Mm-hmm.
I hear that.
I've really been appreciating that. Thank you so much.
Well, Turquoise, thank you for calling in.
Yeah.
We always enjoy it when you decide to give us a call and have a chat with us. So thank you very much for calling today.
All right. Thank you for having me. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
You too.
Bye,
Thank you,
Turquoise. It's a
too.
great call. Thank you.
Wow. She's great, isn't she?
For sure. And, you know, this whole conversation about passing and, you know, whether or not it is a burden or a privilege, I don't want to speak for both of you, but I think we can say that it's both, you know, and maybe in different ratios for different people and frankly, different ratios for different days. But ultimately, it brings me to the idea of how important is it to you to stay connected to some of these like unused identities. You know, Nate, I mean, if you are in a monogamous marriage with a man, does it matter that you're still attracted to women? And Helen, I mean, that same other side, I know you said you were maybe monogamish or on a more soft monogamy, but how relevant, how important is it to your lives to hold on to these things or to stay connected to that queerness?
Well, for me, I'm very lucky because my partner is very open to my bisexuality, and one of the wonderful things about it is that we get to look at women together, and be like, "Oh, I tap that," you know. We talk about our sexual fantasies with one another, and it's very freeing to have that open conversation because he is fully accepting of who I am as a person. So I don't have to hide it. I don't have to make him feel, okay, you know, um, by being bisexual because, of the trust and love that we have for one another. But so that can be wonderful. And I think that, for, someone that is, lives in this space and is part of who I am, that it can be very wonderful to have a partner that is very accepting of your sexuality, that you can watch porn together, and get something out of it. And, you can share your sexual fantasies, you can express these parts of yourself and not feel like, you're taking anything away from your relationship. And I think I think that's really important in any type of relationship that you have, that you can express those sexual desires and fantasies that you have in a safe space. And that's one of the most important things, I think, that so I don't feel for myself that I don't feel like there's something wrong with me in my relationship, because I do have these desires. I can talk about them, and my husband's like, awesome, cool, great, this is wonderful, and I think that's really important in any relationship to talk. If no matter what your relationship looks like, you should be able to talk about your sexual desires, your fantasies, the things you would like to try, whether it be kink or having a threesome or whatever it is, that you're able to talk about it, because then, especially when you're in a monogamous relationship, that you still can express that part of yourself, even if it's only like talking about it in bed when you're having sex. At least you're able to get it out of yourself and you don't have to hide it.
It's a good point. I think that's a big key to a long-term relationship, is being able to be honest with your partner and like say, hey, I'd hit that too, right? And it's not like you're gonna run out and do it. It's just recognizing that other people are still attractive and not being intimidated or threatened by that, right? And then it kind of helps to foster a much deeper connection. For my part, I don't miss the charade of being straight. I don't miss that at all. I'm much happier now that I'm honest with people in my lives and I'm honest with myself. It's a much better way to live your life. It's so much more fulfilling. Sure. And I still do get I get a lot of the straight culture, and my partner is very gay, so I get a lot of the gay stuff too. So I'm not missing out on that, believe me.
Sure. Well, are there practices then? I mean, Nate, it sounds like you've got your bases covered, just living in a very straight world in a lot of ways. But do either of you have maybe strategies or routines or just different ways to affirm some of these adjectives or some of these labels about yourself that maybe don't get used very often?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get really too hung up on the labels, like I just kind of live my life and I am who I am. Like I was saying earlier, my sexuality is such a small part of who I am. There's so much more to me than who I sleep with. So it doesn't affect my day-to-day life really at all. Except, for maybe when somebody sees my hot pink hard hat or hears me use the he pronoun when referring to my partner. And then it comes up. But again, it's usually a pretty short conversation. And they're usually just like, oh, okay, cool. Okay, I'm going to go back to work now. Okay, bye. What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, I'm not really too concerned with label, because I'm very lucky, because my chosen family is like good portion of us are bi or like sexual freaks or whatever you want to call it. So, so we are pretty open with each other and we express our feelings and desires pretty openly. So it's not something I'm really concerned with. And I'm like, I'm not going to talk. I work in an office. Like, I'm not talking about my sexuality and like, my sexual activities with my coworkers and stuff like that. Like, no. Like, I'm not friends with you, so you don't need to know that. They know that I'm married and I have 2 kids. That's all you need to know. Sure. After that, we're done. And I've kind of developed that that I know that I am performing straight. So I can be a little bit more selective about who I let people know about my sexuality and my sexual activities and things like that. And like I said before, I do recognize that as a privilege because I don't have to have uncomfortable conversations with people if I don't want to. If you're trans or gay, or you're non-binary, if you are 100% queer and this is who you are going to have difficult conversations. You're going to have to educate people. You're going to deal with bigotry and all this type of bullshit, and I understand that because I can navigate this space, I don't have to have those conversations if I don't want to. And I understand that it is not fair. And I don't think it's fair, but I have to recognize that I do kind of get a little bit of that privilege because I am bi and I'm in a, monogamous straight relationship for the most part. So, and I can understand that on the opposite end, it can be a little bit frustrating for people, that don't get to do that. And or get weird looks if they say they're with like, a same-sex partner, and I can understand that it can be a little bit daunting. I'm like, can't you just accept it? Like, like you set the straights, like, why do I have to educate you?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And it is a privilege to be able to go under the radar. That's kind of why I started, with the pink hard hat and everything, is because I feel like somebody who, I'm not really adverse to talking to a bigot. If someone has problem, or is giving me dirty looks, I'd be like, do I owe you money or something, bud? Or, like, so as somebody with broad shoulders who is comfortable confronting that and having awkward conversations, and dealing with that, I feel like it's kind of my duty to help normalize it and help people join the 21st century if they're not already here. And I think it's working. I get, like I said earlier, I get much more positive response than I do negative, but I still do get the occasional asshole.
Fair to say, even in a monogamous relationship, I guess.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Even in Canada, we still have those types up here.
Fair to say. Well, is it important to either of you to stay connected to a community that reflects your identity? I mean, if you don't necessarily have a lot of these like practices to affirm these parts of your identity, do you stay in touch with folks that maybe do share that, or that it can maybe help remind you about these pieces of yourself?
For me, very much so. Like, as a gamer, I pretty much only play with other LGBTQ people, just because game chat is a fucking swamp, man. Like, it's just racial slurs and homophobic epithets, and I just can't with that. So the games I play, I actually have this little group of trans folks that I play with, and they're like, it's nice because it doesn't come up. It's not like we're talking about it constantly. It's mostly just have fun, play games, disconnect, and have a safe space for everybody. So it's more about that. It's not like we're constantly discussing LGBTQ issues. It's kind of just a place to chill. So I kind of have that. So I'm lucky.
Yeah, I'll say for myself, it has become incredibly important to find different ways to validate some of these like maybe unused adjectives or some of these parts of myself that aren't getting stretched out all that often, and that's become like a connection to other people who share those things is a really vital part of that. I struggle to maybe explain this, especially when I see that the two of you maybe don't have quite the same experience. But for the audience, it's really worth noting that huge pieces of your identity can get sort of lost or forgotten, or these muscles can kind of atrophy. That doesn't mean that you aren't still queer just because you're in a straight relationship, but you can sort of forget the significance of these kinds of things and maybe lose touch with yourself if you aren't in connection or in community. It's one of the reasons that gay, straight, or otherwise, I encourage everybody to be a little bit more open and a little bit more flexible about talking about their sexuality and sort of, you don't have to tell everybody like, oh man, my husband fucking got it yesterday. But, there is value in being willing to share. I mean, yeah, depending on who you're talking to, right? But there's value in being able to share with people in your life, especially people that you're very intimate with, about the crazy games we played or the wild thing that happened to us or whatever else, so that you have that opportunity to kind of co-regulate and experience that like looking glass self. Does that resonate for either of you?
I know that for myself, that the fact that I can be open with people that I trust really helps me to like reaffirm my identity on a regular basis, that I can go, I can express myself openly to people that I trust and I love them and they love me. And it's very like that confirmation over and over again, and I'm going to do a shout out to the ACI Discord, because that group on there, they're very queer affirming, wonderful people that you can, but like, like we sometimes talk about it, but then like we also shoot the shit on a whole bunch of other things that it doesn't matter. Like Nate was saying with his gaming friends.
Which is really important. Like, I mean, I'll even say as a therapist, like, my time is very expensive in the sense that when people come to talk to me, they're spending a lot of money. And I totally get that there's like an urgency to like, let's get to it. Let's do the thing. And yet we still bullshit and we just kind of talk and get to know each other a little bit, because that's part of being a human. Like, you can't just race into the queer shit.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's like in any relationship, whether it's romantic, friendship, familial or whatever it is, you have to have that flexibility to go back and forth. Like being bi is not my entire identity. I'm a multifaceted person with multifaceted interests and personality and all these different things. Being bi is just a small part of, my identity, but when I am able to express myself and talk about it openly and not get weird looks or people looking at me like, I don't understand what that means. You can't make up your mind. That's another myth that I've heard before. When I get to express that stuff about myself with people that I know aren't going to judge me, it is very freeing, because it just keeps affirming that, for myself, that this is who I am and I don't have anything to be ashamed of, because I know I'm going to be accepted, and and I think that's really, really important, no matter where you are, and if you're in the queer community or not, we just all want to be heard and accepted. And that's a really important thing that we need to start letting people, just be able to express themselves and not put any judgment on them and go like, okay, okay, that's fine. Are you cool? Are you a nice person? Okay, good. All right.
Fair to say.
Yeah.
Nate, did you have anything that you wanted to add here before we jump back on the phones?
I think you two summed it right back up. We do have a call waiting.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We have Allison continuing the Canadian invasion of the atheist community of Austin.
For real.
And she has recently discovered she has Aphantasia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but she's having some difficulty visualizing and creating images in her mind. So it's interfering with her masturbation and her ability to orgasm. So she's wondering if there's other ways that could help that other than just straight watching porn. So Allison, thank you for calling. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm
Hey.
doing great. How are you doing?
Top
I think
shelf.
we're all in great shape. Yeah, we appreciate you calling in. Nate gave us a pretty good rundown. Is there anything you might want to add to that, or can you walk us through a little bit of what this experience has been like?
Well, basically, all the times that I've tried to masturbate, it's been like I'm trying to picture things in my mind, and then when I close my eyes, all I see, it's just all blank and dark. And then I'm trying to picture, I'm trying to feel it up, and I'm trying to do this, and then it turns into one great big huge anxious exercise of trying to think of things, and I end up being very frustrated and going, this isn't working, so I end up just not being satisfied at all and giving up.
Sure.
So I'm wondering if there's other ways other than visualizing, like are there any any kind of textures or smells or just anything that you guys can think of that would help?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Christy. You're the professional, so
cool. Yeah, I think we're all jumping on the bit a little bit. I would suggest that the struggle here, or the issue perhaps, is not your lack of an ability to visualize. It's maybe your sexual intelligence, your insistence on trying to have a type of sex that isn't really working, rather than your willingness to enjoy the sex that does work or that you can be having. You know, the real value here is in getting in touch with your body. And I know we live in a very visual culture in a lot of ways. There is a assumption that all pornography is visual pornography. And we're even using that term. When you said porn, I think the assumption was that we're talking about either still images or videos, with the emphasis being on visualness. And, you know, especially growing up in an evangelical community, we were told over and over and over that men in particular are such visual creatures. And if we are looking at something and you know, the eyes, like that was really the emphasis in every kind of way. And I just have to stress that that's not what sex needs to be about. You know, there are so many different ways to enjoy your sexuality or to enjoy sexual sensation. And so I would really encourage you, first and foremost, to dramatically expand your definition of porn, whether that means through like erotic literature or through erotic audio or things along those lines. Certainly, there are lots of things to explore through different toys and sensations. But ultimately, if you have this diagnosis, I would imagine that you may be working with some kind of professional provider, and it might be worth getting better in touch with your own somatic experience, with a better understanding of what's going on inside of your body, getting a sense of where the gas and the brakes are, and a more just intimate relationship with your own sensations. There are a lot of ways to do that. It can get a little bit complex without getting a little bit more detail about what you're going through. But I'm wondering if anything that I'm saying is connecting with anything or resonating for you first.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Like, I find that sometimes if I'm listening to music, I will get a feeling of just euphoria just coursing through my body, and it's really wild. So add some masturbation into that, and I bet you I'd have some success for sure.
Yeah. And recognize
please
these
go
things.
ahead, Nate.
Yeah, sorry. Recognizing these things that are working for you and then transferring that into a positive experience, you know, like who's to say that you need to focus, like Christy was saying, on an image or a video. Like, really just clear your head and focus on what it is that you're feeling, and focus on your body and what parts of your body are feeling good. And don't try to overthink it. Just enjoy the moment, you know, and focus on your body and what that feels. That's actually someone called in to the Recovering from Religion helpline a while back, and had the privilege of having Dr. Ray talk to them. And that's kind of what he said, was just don't really focus on trying to make it happen. Just focus on what you're feeling. Focus on how you're feeling, right? Where are you feeling it in your body? So if you find that piece of music that speaks to you, or you find that that song that really gets you going, right? There's no, you don't have to focus, you know, sort of try to generalize and just focus on the emotion and the pleasant feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that helps at all.
Number, call back.
Yeah. I would also encourage, really, I feel like I've been beating this drum for a minute or two, but I would encourage everybody listening to explore erotic audio, to explore all of these different kinds of things, because you may find that is a easier way for you to connect than through a more visual medium. Now, your experience of visualization within your own head may or may not get thrown off here, depending on what you're enjoying or what you're listening to. But just know that there is such a incredible variety of sensations and experiences that are available here. And if something isn't working, move on. You know, be an omnivore. Be willing to just try things, even the silly things, and see what clicks, what feels good, and what's working for you. And don't be afraid to prioritize this, to spend a little bit of time and a little bit of money on special toys, on paying for your pornography, whether that's visual or otherwise. There are some really great free communities of erotic audio, and I would encourage you to explore those kinds of things as well. But just know that your sexuality, your ability to get off, it fucking matters. You know, we wouldn't be doing this show and having these conversations if orgasm wasn't significant. It isn't the end all be all of a sexual experience. And like Nate said, if you are just trying to get to that finish line, you're probably never going to get there. It's more about the journey than the destination, so as they say. But in any case, know that this can be important, that you're not a pervert for spending an hour or $100 on a toy or whatever else that helps you to get to that place. And when you get there, notice the experience. Notice in your body what it feels like. Get a sense of, oh, when I'm really turned on or when I'm really close to orgasm, my skin feels like this, my heart feels like that. You know, notice these different sensations, and it'll be a lot easier for you to get back there when it's time to.
Helen, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was kind of going to agree with Nate that, like, you know, don't worry so much if you're going to have an orgasm. You know, you might not. It's okay. You know, it's more about like finding pleasure in your own body. You know, what clicks, what makes you feel good and stuff like that. If it's buying like a really sexy piece of panties and wearing them underneath your clothes, and then you know, touching those while you're masturbating, you know, that works. You know, whatever it is to make you feel like a sexual creature, that's what you should focus on. And then, you know, the orgasms will come, you know, literally. So,
Yeah.
you know, I would focus on, you know, what makes you feel alive, what makes you feel beautiful, what makes you feel sexy, and focus on that. Don't focus so much on the end goal, you know, because you will get there eventually.
Okay, fabulous. I do know that I can have orgasms because I had a partner who was able to get me there, and I had never had that powerful experience before. And then I discovered that I can actually have multiples, which is awesome. And so I found that if I had already been intimate with him and had a bunch of orgasms, sometimes he would leave, and then I would continue on for a while, and then it was like, hey, I myself have orgasms, and it was so I've been successful in that sense. It's just starting and, you know, being able to actually get there is where I'm having difficulties.
Yeah, it really helps to prime the pump. And, you know, that first one may be a little bit more difficult to achieve, and that's okay. You're allowed to spend time on it, and you're allowed to enjoy yourself along the way. Even if you don't achieve orgasm, it doesn't mean that you're not having a good time. And the truth is, life finds a way. If you aren't having an orgasm, and you aren't having an orgasm, and you aren't having an orgasm, but you are going through the motions and putting in a little bit of time, you will get there. And the fact that you are able to achieve it so much more easily after having that experience, just to me, again, highlights the fact that when you're in that headspace and when you are remembering those experiences within your body and you're tuned in to that somatic experience, that it's a lot easier to achieve. And as you get more practice, it will become easier and easier and easier.
Another thing that I wanted to point out is that I have ADHD, so that has really interfered with things too, in terms of focus. I find that, you know, like I used to try having music and all these other sounds and stuff, and it was just more distracting than anything. And I found that having sex in complete quiet helped with getting me there with my partner. So that's another thing that
whatever helps you relax.
Yeah, and I do have unfortunately I do have sexual trauma mixed in with all of it too, so sometimes I'm just, you know, not in that headspace, and it's good to recognize, like, if I'm not in the headspace, I'm not gonna have an orgasm, period. So
yeah, and there's no need to, you know, I mean, orgasms feel great. And yeah, it would occasionally be nice to be able to just take an orgasm pill and be able to have that experience. But you don't need to be in a good mood all the time. You don't need to be in a sexy mood all the time. You get to be in a good mood when you're in a good mood. You get to be hungry when you're hungry. You get to be horny when you're horny. And that variety is part of what makes life so beautiful. When you are beating your head against the wall because it's just not working, move on. Come back to it. You know, just because when you're not hungry, you don't stand there in the kitchen shoving food down your throat. And if you are, then maybe you're not living your most fulfilling life, and it's worth kind of being more mindful and taking a step back.
Yeah, and like this, one of the side effects, it's funny you should mention food, because one of the side effects of the ADHD meds is lack of appetite. So sometimes I literally have to force myself to eat because I haven't eaten all day or whatever. So it's an interesting tie-in.
Yeah, no, and maybe there is some of that here too. You know, perhaps even when you aren't feeling sexy, or if it's been a long time since you felt sexy, then yeah, maybe it is worth like just stopping. And when you're not hungry, oftentimes if you go ahead, you make yourself a healthy plate, a small plate of food, you put it in front of yourself, you take a bite. A lot of times you'll notice, oh, wait, I actually do have an appetite once you get things going. And that may be true here as well. But if you are just eating and eating and eating and nothing is really appetizing, nothing is really appealing, it's okay to stop and come back to it later when the mood maybe strikes a little bit differently. I'm going to recommend in particular to you Sexual Intelligence by Marty Klein if you are invested in like a really heavy read. And if you're looking for something a little bit more accessible or a little bit shorter, then the work of Esther Perel might be a really good choice here. Or also Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. Any of those could be a really good fit for getting a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more aware of your body.
Okay. Any chance you could post those in chat for me?
I will make sure that they are in the show notes for this episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for calling.
Bye, Allison.
Bye.
Thank you for calling, Allison.
Yes.
Wow, Christy.
Yeah, I didn't mean to just start like data jumping a bunch of books there, but yeah, I realize it's been a minute since I've done that. So
That was awesome.
do your reading. Sex is worth reading.
And I also wanted to say on Allison's point, like I also have ADHD and I'm on medication for it, and it can kill your sex drive.
Sure.
It really does. I find that, but then when I am feeling sexual and either I masturbate or I have sex, I'm like, oh, I actually like this. I remember how to do this. This is fun. So, but it does take a little while for those, because the medication really isn't, it suppresses your appetite, it suppresses your sex drive and all these different things, that you sometimes have to be like, oh yeah, I do like really good food. I do like really good sex. And you have to kind of, almost remind yourself, because of, the way the medications affect you. So I definitely felt Allison on that point. So.
Yeah. Well, as we're getting a little bit long here, I guess I wanted to ask both of you what we should be doing to create a world with a little bit more visibility, to just make more space for queer folks who are, who aren't wearing pink hard hats, or who aren't painting their fingernails, or for queer folks that are in, quote, straight relationships and these different kinds of things. Do you have any advice for what sorts of changes we might be working towards as a culture or as a society?
Be visible.
Mm-hmm.
Be visible, and don't shy away from those conversations. If you're stable, if you're in a position to have them. The percentage of bigots is hopefully going down, and as we have these conversations, it must go down. It will go down, because education of people is one of the best ways to elevate society. For example, it's been shown that when you educate women and give them control of their bodies, teenage pregnancy goes down, literacy goes up, productivity goes up. So having conversations and educating people is never a bad thing.
Yeah, fair to say.
Yeah, and also too, if I can speak to the older queer folks in the audience, make sure that the younger generation has a safe space to talk about these things. That because they're going through their own anxieties, their own worries, how they're going to navigate their gender and sexuality. Be a voice for them. Be a place that they can come to and talk about these issues, because, they might not have somebody that they can talk to and that can guide them and give them the value of experience. So, I really recommend that, we start having these conversations with younger people, that we take care of each other, and that we are, because, the trailblazers have to take care of the younger generation, and they're going to blaze their own trail. So, I think that joining those two communities together is really, really important. And there is more visibility, and we have these conversations, and about our feelings and the life that we have to navigate. I think those things are really important, and we need to be able to just talk freely about it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to. So.
Yeah, and I'll say very gently that I completely agree with what both of you are saying about being visible, about being loud and out and proud and these different things. And for me, I'm a just very obnoxious person. So whatever I was going to be, I was going to be very loudly, and I get that. And I wouldn't want to live my life any other way. I'll certainly say that in the moments in my life when I have thought, well, this kind of describes me, I guess I'll go ahead and, I've got a lot of privilege. Like, I can take the heat. I can maybe take the heat off of somebody else by being visible in those ways. That, a year or two later, I've been like, oh yeah, no. I wasn't just like slipping into that identity. I am that thing. Like, I am way more queer than I initially thought when I took on some of these different labels. But I'll also say that as invaluable as it is to be loud and out and proud, it can be perhaps harder than you think to give up on that passing privilege, which again is a double-edged sword. Like I said, by embracing these parts of my identity, they've definitely shown up and they've become much more significant in my life. But also, that can be a real challenge. And so I don't want to caution people. I don't want to throw cold water on anybody. I just want to say that if you are finding that it's kind of hard coming out in these different ways, that, yeah, the world is still kind of a scary place for a lot of queer folks. And I am hoping that the three of us and honestly everybody who is watching, who has taken the time to better understand their own sexuality as well as the sexuality of the people around them, we are all part of the solution here. And we are working to make this a better place. But we're not there yet. And it's okay if this stuff is kind of hard. With that in mind, do y'all have any resources, tips, or tricks, or Helen, if you wanted to add on to that?
Well, like if you're out there and you're struggling, if you can find even just one person that you can be completely vulnerable with, that you can express yourself with, it's a start, and as you start navigating the space, you have to judge for yourself, like, how much do you want to be out? Do you want to perform straight? Do you want to be in a gay relationship? Do you want to be in a poly relationship? Do you want to be in a monogamous relationship? Whatever that looks like.
Do you want to tell people that you're bi? Do you want to tell people that you're pan? Like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, find that out for yourself. And there's no such thing as like you're going to arrive. This will be a lifelong thing that will change and shift, and depending on what kind of relationships you have, what kind of social circle you're in and stuff like that. So find what is comfortable for you. But if you have to start with just one person, start with one person. And then, as you start getting a little bit of support, and find communities online. I belong to a bisexual experience Facebook group, that I connect with other bi people, and we share memes and talk about jokes, and
cannot underestimate the value of queer memes.
It's
exactly. A real life bringer here. Absolutely.
Yep, I love my queer memes. But just having that community to connect to is really, really important. So, whatever you can do to find, either one person or 20 people or 30 people or whatever it is, so you can be like, here I can express who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And navigating that space, it does wonders,
Yeah.
Well said. Very well said.
Do y'all have any messages for the straight folks out in the audience tonight?
Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And also all you straight people that might have some myths, these myths you've heard about bi people, some of them may be true and some of them are not. And I go, but just like your sexuality has its own expression and stuff like that, so do bi people, and also to not assume just because someone's in a straight relationship means that they are straight.
Yeah, no, fair to say. And just that these rumors or some of these ideas might be true on like a macro level.
Right.
It may be true statistically that you are likely to X, Y, or Z or whatever else, but that people aren't statistics. People are individuals, and each person that you're talking to is worth getting to know as a person rather than a label or an adjective. We've spent an hour and a half tonight talking about all of these different identifiers, all of these different labels, and there's value in that. It's how you find community. It's how you find a sense of identity. But like we've said over and over to some of the callers and throughout these conversations, we're all individuals. our story can't be wrapped up in a particular moniker. Like when I refer to myself as pansexual, as straight, as heteroflexible, all in the context of the same conversation, I'm not being dishonest. I just don't have a word to describe the specific person that I exist as, and nobody else does either, and that's okay.
Yeah,
all words
for
are made
sure.
up anyway.
Words
That's
are
my
made
favorite
up, and the
expression.
points don't matter.
Right.
Exactly. And also don't expect that every person on the LGBTQ spectrum is going to want to explain this to you, right? Like don't expect that it's their job to educate you on who it is that they like to sleep with, or what all of these terms mean, right? Like this isn't something that every single one of us wants to talk about. So if you want to talk about it, gauge responses, right? Do it in an appropriate manner, and also find out for yourself. I mean, the information is not that hard to find in the 21st century. So, find out for yourself and gauge the responses of the people that you're trying to interact with.
Mm-hmm.
Google is your friend.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's like the three of us or the folks on this show and shows like it are your representative of queer culture. Thank you. I'm flattered, but I am not like representative of every queer person, because I am very obnoxious. And when you put a microphone in front of me, I'm going to sit here and lecture you. It's what I do. But that's not true of every queer person you interact with. And don't expect an academic lecture from everybody that you talk to.
Absolutely.
Any tips for the queer kids out in the audience?
If you like, my always is that like, you have like, first thing, make sure you're safe. That is the number one priority. Make sure you're safe, that it is okay for you to start expressing yourself. So, that's always my number one concern. What follows now, like, okay, like for example, if you think you're straight and then you have a same sex experience, that doesn't mean you're bi or pan. It just means you had an experience.
Right.
But if you found that through that experience that you're like, maybe I want a little more of this. Maybe I do want to explore this other side of my sexuality. That's okay too. That as you start getting older, and especially like when you're young, sexuality is a very awkward, strange place to be when you're trying to figure all this stuff out. But as you get older and as you find who you're comfortable with and you feel good in your own skin, you will find that your sexuality will kind of be able to develop as the way it's supposed to. So, and also, as long as everything is consensual and everybody's having a great time, everything else does not matter. And that you are okay just the way you are, and again, I'm always about if it's one person, if it's your best friend that you can come out to, then come out to your best friend, and then, but if you have a bigger support, like your family doesn't care, and they'll love you anyway, but don't ever feel ashamed for your feelings. Your feelings are going to feel, and you need to and as long as you're taking care of yourself and you're doing things responsibly and you have at least some support system, you're going to be fine. You're gonna be fine, because, all of us here can tell you that, I bet when we were younger and, we were trying to figure out our sexuality and gender and all that type of stuff, we felt like you did. And then we got a little bit older and then we were like, oh, you know what? I'm just me. And I'm okay just being who I am.
Yeah, I almost feel like I should bookmark this episode so that 5 years from now I can come back and be like, You thought you were heteroflexible. All of these adjectives you threw at yourself, they don't apply anymore.
Right.
And that is A-okay. These words are again, they're all made up. They're important and they matter. People have died for them. People die continuously for a lot of these adjectives, and I don't want to dismiss them in the least bit, while also pointing out that they're all just very silly ways to try and encapsulate a human being in a string of syllables. And you can't do that with any kind of real accuracy.
We just love labels.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate both of y'all being willing to kind of share your own experiences and open up about all of this tonight. I mentioned it when we were sort of prepping for this episode, but this show I think officially premiered to the public after a lot of like practice and stuff. I want to say in August of 2018. And I went back and I found some notes from October of 2018 that this was an episode we wanted to do. And we just have never quite had the right configuration. And it's just never quite come up. So I'm so glad that I got to have this story with y'all and to talk about all of these things. And with that, Nate, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap us up for the night.
Hey, better late than never, Christy. All right. All right, so we've got some links for Helen, if we could get those up. So there she is. Yeah. Helen Greene. Hell's bells. A lot of our folks, our viewers on Discord, are going to recognize her from there.
I was definitely like, oh, that's who Helen is.
Also, Helen is a helpline volunteer for Recovering from Religion. So you can reach them at recoveringfromreligion.org. Great folks. The volunteers at Recovering from Religion do amazing work of helping those healing from religious trauma. So thank you for being a part of that, Helen.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful organization. I'm very proud to be a part of it. So, reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter, on the Discord. I'll talk to you. I'm friendly.
He is friendly, folks. I can vouch for that.
And also, like, I'm just gonna say that, like, again, like, be proud of who you are, embrace it, love yourself, because life is too fucking short, Mm-hmm. So, the best thing, and be yourself, because, you can't be anybody else. So be yourself, love yourself, and, and enjoy life, mm-hmm. And love who you're going to love, because again, life is too fucking short to put any restrictions on yourself.
Fair to say.
Great advice. And for other nuggets of wisdom, mm-hmm. the ACA has other shows, mm-hmm. other podcasts, other broadcasts. We've got, we've got Your Truth Wanted, which is on tomorrow. Wonderful show. We've got The Nonprofits, and there's that other show called The Atheist Experience. I think some guy named Matt hosts that. But you might have heard of that show. But you can reach all of that content at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. As well, there is a Facebook group for fans of secular sexuality. You can find us on Facebook. We are all there having a chat. It is, as Helen was saying earlier, it is a safe space for all folks to come in, ask some questions, get yourself educated. And even for the straight folks who are watching, right? If you're looking for answers to some of these more difficult questions, that's one place to do it, because the people who are going to answer you there are people like me, people like Christy, the other admins and moderators there that are comfortable having those conversations. So that is a great resource for you.
Yeah, you want to find your queer memes. That's a great place to get started.
Exactly. Exactly. There's also a few memes on the ACA Discord. The ACA Discord, where Helen is quite active. I'm usually quite active on there as well. tiny.cc/ACA Discord. You can hang out with all us cool folks from the ACA, and there's a great peer group there that it's always pretty bumping. It's always pretty lively. The conversation in there is always rolling. Nearly 24 hours a day, I would say. Wouldn't you say, Helen?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what time it is, there's usually a bunch of chatters on talking about all types of things. And
all types of things.
Yeah, and for the most part, everybody's really welcoming and warm and friendly. So, it's a wonderful community. I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's a great community. And we also have merch. Secular Sexuality has merch. We got your coffee cups. We got your posters. We got your t-shirts here. So you can go to bit.ly/AEN merch. There's also merchandise for the other atheist community of Austin broadcasts. So hit us up. And finally, the most important part, our crew cam, the most important people.
Thank you to all of those sexy people that make this show happen.
The 7 sexiest secular people who make this show so scintillating. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome.
All right. Well, with that, I guess this is as good a time as any to remind folks that whether you are listening to erotic audio or reading some erotic literature, whether you are with somebody or whether you are by yourself, whether you're visualizing or just remembering with a shiver, that, if you care to, go out and give yourself a big ol' orgasm. Or better yet, give somebody else one.
Exactly.